Hi there, I thought it might be useful just to share some information on the naturopathic perspective on endometriosis and also some of the emerging evidence and research on this condition. And some of these points may or may not be valid for you specifically, so take this more as an overview, and if you're consulting with me on your health, then we will look specifically at what your factors are. For a long period of time, doctors and naturopaths and health practitioners have looked at endometriosis as an estrogen-dominant condition. Now, there are some aspects to the way that endometriosis unfolds that do reflect a strong estrogenic nature. One of these is that estrogen is a very yin, very proliferative hormone. It likes to build things. For example, in the first 2 weeks of the menstrual cycle, estrogen is very busy building your uterine lining in preparation for a possible pregnancy and embryo implantation. So that's where you see the proliferative nature of estrogen. If estrogen is very high, then it's quite likely that you will have a lot of uterine lining building in that first 2 weeks of the cycle, and you're more likely to have a heavier bleed. When I mentioned that estrogen is a very yin hormone, these are also the qualities of yin. Yin is very building and expanding in the body. The more yin foods that you eat, foods from the earth, foods that are very moist and heavy, and sometimes sweet, not always, but the more you have of those sorts of foods, the more possibly estrogenic you're going to be. And when I say that this term estrogen dominance really refers to a situation where estrogen has become uncontrollably high. There is a little bit of a myth that we have to kind of unpack here, in that estrogen dominance is quite different to just having too much hormone compared to other hormones like progesterone. Estrogen and progesterone balance each other out. Therefore, if you have too little progesterone, it will feel like you have too much estrogen. And a common phenomenon that I see in conditions like endometriosis is that progesterones are too low. Therefore, the estrogen has been allowed to become overly proliferative. This term proliferative has come up a few times. That's what endometriosis is. Endometriosis results in the growths of endometrial tissues in areas where they really shouldn't be in the body. Those tissues grow and act as if they are a uterine lining tissue. This is what the endometrium is. So if you have endometrial style tissues growing in other areas of your body, then every time it comes to that sort of time for the monthly bleed, those tissues have nowhere to bleed to. If they were situated in your uterus and they were actually the endometrium lining, then it would be easy for the body to shed those tissues as they break down and bleed. But that doesn't happen in, I was going to say that's not the case. That doesn't happen in endometriosis. So what we end up getting is that these tissues are bleeding and they're just creating these little sacs of blood. Those sacs of blood act like we would expect a sac of blood to behave. They come out, they clot, they get big and sticky, and they tend to adhere different parts of the body together. They're just doing what they should do as a blood clot. The problem, therefore, is that they're in the wrong part of the body. They cause a lot of pain, spasm, and for some women, even if you have advanced endometriosis, you may not even feel any pain. But you might have early stage endometriosis and have a lot of pain. So there is a visceral aspect to this that can vary from individual to individual. Testing can confirm if your estrogen is too high in comparison to your progesterone, or simply if you have too much estrogen overall, and possibly you might have estrogen dominance. But be wary of people who throw that phrase around. Not every woman who has high levels of estrogen compared to progesterone will be estrogen dominant. Now, testing can confirm the presence of too much estrogen, too little, progesterone levels, and so on. But it's not the whole story. Research is showing us that there's a very strong inflammatory aspect to endometriosis, and as it gets more and more explored, we've come to understand that there are changes in the immune system as well. So some of the other factors involved in endometriosis is chronic inflammation and overproduction of certain types of chemicals which are pro-inflammation. These include interleukin 6, interleukin 8, interleukin 10, tumor necrosis factor, and VEGF. It happens that inflammatory molecules like this tend to promote the growth of endometrial tissues. This further complicates or perhaps even led to the growth of those endometriomas and endometrial tissues. There's also involvement of immune cells in endometriosis. The immune system can start to favor the growth of endometrial tissues because it favors angiogenesis, which simply means the growth of new tissues. This can be good in many cases, but in this case, in endometriosis, it's not, because it's spurring on an already proliferative condition. In endometriosis, there can be some issues with the regulation of the immune system, and it favors a lot of localized inflammation. Part of it will be the increase in the production of those pro-inflammation chemicals or molecules that I mentioned before. Another aspect of it is that there will be more new tissue development, known as angiogenesis. This new tissue development is going to favor the production of new tissues like endometrial tissues. So this spurs on that proliferative cycle that we see in endometriosis. Now this so far means that we can't just target hormones. It won't be enough to just target estrogen. We also need to look at inflammation in the body and what's happening with the immune system. We can better regulate the immune system, and we can use herbs to reduce the level of inflammation and the level of those particular inflammatory chemicals that I mentioned before, so we can effectively reduce their production. Another aspect that's being investigated with endometriosis is whether or not bacterial infection can be behind the condition or spur it on. Some gram-negative bacteria can end up producing in your body a lot of this byproduct called lipopolysaccharides, which is often abbreviated to LPS. We know that LPS tends to have an effect on the pelvic area in your body. In this part of your body, they stimulate more inflammation and increase the growth of the endometriomas. It's possible that if your progesterone levels test normal, that you don't actually have a chronic stress situation leading to low levels of progesterone and then higher levels of estrogen. It's actually possible that you may have progesterone resistance. So in this instance, your body is not properly responding to the soothing and anti-inflammatory effects of progesterone. And that can be another aspect of looking into your hormone health to see why that might have occurred and improving the response of your body to progesterone's effects. Before I finish up here, I wanted to just let you know about a few things around diet with endometriosis. Now, it's quite possible if I'm working with you already that I would have given you a specific diet. Now, the research is showing that probably the best thing you can do in endometriosis is switch to a low FODMAP diet. This is based a lot on some of the symptoms that we get in conditions like irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, where high FODMAP foods containing those sugars tend to produce cramping and pain. Now, I really think that a good healthy diet is going to be probably quite anti-inflammatory. It's not going to have too much no processed foods ideally, not too much sugar. So that's going to just benefit you, baseline. And I think that the reason why low FODMAP is coming up so much is because we're very focused on the pain. But I'd love you to think about the pain as the symptom, the alert signal from your body that there is something else going on underneath. And what's really going on underneath is all that inflammation. So I will always recommend an anti-inflammatory diet in combination with a high flavonoid diet. It could be quercetin, it could be polyphenols that we're using, but there will be a very strong, focus from my perspective on reducing the levels of inflammation in your body and getting you to eat in a way that supports that. And finally, research is also showing that changes, or maybe reducing your casein intake, your dairy intake, your gluten intake, can also be really helpful. So there are lots of things that you can do in terms of diet to support you in endometriosis. So far in summary, we know that there is a high estrogen aspect to endometriosis, but we also know that we're looking at the mechanisms behind inflammation, immune dysfunction, possible bacterial infection, and maybe some of those mechanisms could have been chronic and prolonged stress, which has affected the progesterone levels. They could also be having a genetic history of endometriosis, and there could be other reasons why the immune system has become dysregulated. So all of these aspects of your health can be investigated, giving you that power and control back over your hormone health. Endometriosis can be a very painful condition, so don't rule out the fact that naturopaths like me can help you with pain management. We have specific herbs that we use to prevent cramping, spasm, and we can alter the dosage so that it's just right for you. It's not always going to be possible that a naturopath will fix or cure endometriosis. So it's important to be able to think realistically about what your accomplishments are going to be. And I would recommend that we first start on regulating the hormones, get the hormones in the right ratios to each other, therefore stopping that vicious cycle of tissue development. And at the same time, we work on reducing the symptoms of endometriosis. And truth is, if your hormones are all healthy and you're not having symptoms and you're not in pain, then you've really got this condition well managed. I hope this has been helpful for you, and feel free to get in touch if you have any questions.